So it's happened. Eddie Jones has been sacked as the England head coach, but with less than a year before the World Cup, was it the right decision? And what happens next? And I thought you were going to score.
Ask a better question, you get a better answer.
Hi guys, welcome back. So the rumours were there and it's now happened. Eddie Jones has indeed been sacked by the RFU. A big decision for them, a bold decision for them, an expensive decision for them. And in the meantime, all we know is that Richard Cockerell is the interim head, if you like, of rugby affairs. And I'm sure they will name a new head coach very soon. They probably would have liked to have done it at the same time. My guess is that the front runner, Steve Borthwick, they're probably still ongoing with negotiations with him and Leicester. That could be tricky because I don't think Leicester really wanted to let him go. Maybe Borthwick ideally would have liked to stay at Leicester for a little bit longer, but the opportunity's here now. So let's see, but we think it's probably Steve Borthwick. Maybe Scott Robertson is still in the frame. I think as a short-term option, he could be quite good and he'd probably be okay with a one-year contract if that was all that was an offer in case that New Zealand came calling after the World Cup. So I wonder if that is still there as a backup, but it looks like Borthwick might be on the way, but that's going to have to come in the next video. But for now, let's just talk about Eddie Jones. Was it the correct call? Well, I'll talk about Eddie Jones's overall tenure as England head coach in another video because he's been there for 7 years. Now, firstly, I think it's really important to acknowledge that Eddie Jones has shown unbelievable levels of commitment to his job and he clearly wants England to do really well. And you've got to respect that sort of work ethic. So I'll do a separate video talking about all those successes and how impressive Eddie Jones's England have been at times, and of course the decline as well. But we're going to look at why he was sacked and what next, and certainly results played a big part. Now overall his winning percentage is the highest out of any England coach, which has to be respected. And the year 2020-21 was a good winning ratio, but they were 5th in the Six Nations with 2 wins, and then there was another Six Nations with 2 wins the season after, even though they were 3rd in that one. And then in this autumn, the straw that broke the camel's back, they just didn't show that progression. All that was promised didn't come. They obviously lost 2, drew 1, won 1. And also got pretty badly beaten again by South Africa. Now, one question mark I had about Eddie Jones was whether he was using the Six Nations too much as a testing ground, whether it was all building up to the World Cup and whether that's acceptable to fans. And my view is not really. I think he needs to take the Six Nations more seriously potentially. And it's not all about the World Cup, but that is a good debate. And certainly there were still people out there believing that maybe this was all part of a wider plan and maybe England had to go backwards to go forwards and maybe there was a bit of deception and holding stuff back. Now, of course, we'll never know the answer. Maybe he would have come good. But for me, I think his strategies and his selections and his combinations of the two and his problems with assistant coaches and maybe his overbearing nature taking control of everything just combined to lead to his downfall. And to say it all would have come good and they were kind of holding lots back, I think that's just verging onto a bit of a conspiracy theory. I don't really buy it. But again, it could have been true. And I really think that England weren't performing the way that Eddie thought they would perform with his new system. And I'm pretty convinced that Eddie was convinced that with this new system, England should have been playing better than they were now. So basically, my answer is yes, I think it probably is the right call to remove Eddie Jones now. He's done so many great things for England and he should be praised for that. But I think over the last couple of years, he's just struggled to reinvent England, lost a lot of good assistant coaches and some not so good ones, struggled to recruit more, verging on desperation at times. You know, sometimes it's been a bit like that scene out of Mike Bassett, England manager. If you're old enough to remember that film where, you know, the wife of the coach says, oh, he'd love to, but he's a bit busy at the moment. He got to that sort of stage, to be honest. And I think it's fair to say that some of his downfall was the fact that he was the sole decision maker at the end of the day. It was his way or the highway. That can be dispiriting for assistant coaches, and of course collecting more ideas from valued people is normally better than just your own. Have a look at Matthew Syed's book on rebel ideas if you want to talk about cognitive diversity, getting the best outcome, optimal solutions, all that sort of thing is quite interesting. And I think Eddie Jones just fell into that trap of being the sole decision maker, and when that goes wrong, there's nowhere else to go. And I think that also applied to some of the very talented players in the English Premiership that were either ignored or brought into the camp for a little bit, then discarded, and maybe they should have been given a bit more of a chance. And I think we saw that in stark reality in the autumn's internationals, where there was so much game-breaking talent left in the Premiership when England really, really needed it. The likes of Radwan, Hassel-Collins, Murley, Dombrandt, Ben Earl, maybe they needed something a bit special, but Eddie didn't like something about their game. And I think that's in contrast to some of the players he did take a chance on before the 2019 World Cup, like Ellis Genge, Kyle Sinclair, etc. And because he hasn't found the talent that he's been looking for, maybe, he's turned back to those tried and trusted players who probably simply aren't quite the players they used to be. And also in that search for the next big thing, Eddie Jones has definitely plucked a few players from complete obscurity where no one thought they were actually good enough to be in the England squad, and then indeed they've disappeared from the squad or they've only featured once and everyone thought, oh yes, that's why they weren't in the squad as well. So there's a definite combination of not trusting the actual talent that's out there and bringing in players who probably didn't have the talent anyway because he thought he saw something special when it wasn't there. So basically I'm saying that with so much riding on one man's decisions, when there's no real checks and balances, it only takes for one thing to go wrong for it all to go wrong. And I think that's kind of what happened here. They had those goals where Eddie said, our goal is to be the best team in the world. We want to light up Twickenham, or we're looking for hybrid players, and we never really saw any of that translate in front of our eyes. And I think that culminated in this latest failure, the experiment with Smith and Farrell, which certainly was cleverly conceived and could move the ball very nicely into change, but then he gave them a 70% to Alangi and the slowest back three in Tier 1 rugby and expected great things to happen because it looked good on paper. In reality, when reality met the plan, it just didn't work. And despite all the great things that Eddie Jones has undoubtedly achieved with England in the past, I think it is the right time to go. I think he's just overcomplicated the sport a bit in his own head, missed a few of the fundamentals. For example, in the age of professional coaches and analysis, almost everyone's going to have a pretty good system. Are you really going to outthink the likes of Joe Smith, Erasmus, Andy Farrell that much? I think that's unlikely. Coaches and players are human and they might not have that obsessive drive that Eddie Jones has. And after a while, especially when you lose, coaches and players start to have enough, burn out a little bit. Japan all testament to that. They achieved great things under Eddie Jones, but they would say almost to a man they wouldn't want to do it again. So as they say, I think the relationship has run its course and they move on. But the question is, to what? Now in the next day or so, I'm fully expecting Steve Borthwick to be announced as the New England head coach, but it might not happen. Now, if it is Steve Borthwick, I'd be really happy with that. On my list of top 5 coaches, I'd put Borthwick as number 2. Farrell was never really realistic, I know, because Ireland weren't ever going to let him go, and he probably wouldn't want to leave either. Robertson, I think, is possibly still a good option, especially as a stopgap coach, maybe just for a year. But for a long-term coach, I think Steve Borthwick would be ideal. Hopefully they give him a contract not just to the World Cup, but beyond as well. But I think we're going to have to save talking about Steve Borthwick until it actually happens, if it does actually happen. Now, of course, we're all experts in hindsight, and maybe the RFU should have let Eddie Jones go earlier. We know he has a record of burning teams out and working in shorter periods and maybe not over the longer term, but certainly he would have had good plans. He would have convinced the RFU that his plans were logical and they would come into fruition, but clearly they've had enough and they don't believe in it anymore. But of course, the big question is, was it the right decision? Is it too late with the World Cup only 9 months away? Is it now a longer project and they're going to have to give up on the World Cup, or is there time to turn it around? One thing I think is for sure is there's going to be a big buzz around Twickenham come the Six Nations, say it's Borthwick or Robertson, whoever it is. I think it's going to be buzzing, but will they bring that buzz to the pitch? Of course, that's what we want to see. So let me know if you think it's the right call, the wrong call, and what should happen next. Pop all those comments below, and I'll catch you next time.